How would you like to disappear?
Disappear?
Go undercover.
You know this man?
Who's here? I'm here. You're here.
These victims are all the same physical type.
What about him, Skip?
Late 20s, 140, 150 pounds. Dark hair, dark eyes.
Have you ever seen him before?
I want to send you out there to see if you can attract this guy.
How, where?
A New York City detective in search of a killer is about to disappear into the night.
Is it dangerous?
I can't talk about it.
How do you know you're going to end up the same person when it's over?
An odyssey to the edge of city life.
Bartenders are starting to give me some information. There's this name keeps popping up all the time. There he is. The one with the hat.
Is that the one that followed you?
Yeah.
Why didn't you go with him?
I don't know. I think you should check him.
If you want to play, I'll play with you.
He's the wrong guy.
Prints don't match.
What he sees
Who's here?
what he feels,
I don't think I can do the job, Captain. I don't think I can handle it.
I'm here.
There's just stuff going down. I don't think I can deal with it.
You're here.
what he experiences, what he discovers will change his life forever. Al Pacino.
Who's here? I'm here. You're here.
Cruising.
Hello, welcome to Movie Humpers. My name, Bob Sham.
My name, Angela.
And the sounds you hear are dogs or hard pounding in the club. Hard ass pounding. Ass, pound, ass, pound. Yes, it is. Movies are gay is the theme this month. It's our second. It's Movies Are Gay too. So we're revisiting LGBTQ themed and movies by LGBTQ, sometimes closeted LGBTQ. But in this one, it is it's an interesting one to look back on. This is the first time I've ever seen this movie.
Same.
And
This movie is very gay.
yeah,
From the get, and
it might be the gayest thing a straight man has ever made.
maybe.
Because William Friedkin,
I
the
thought
guy.
it was very well done.
He's the guy that made this movie. He's the guy that he won Best Picture with The French Connection. He's also the guy that directed The Exorcist.
Oh.
And plenty others.
That might, I don't know if I've seen any of his other movies.
And this is his second gay movie. His first one, and I actually booked this movie to discuss later this month, The Boys in the Band, which came out in 1970. Yes. I didn't mean to double book William Friedkin. I just didn't know he directed The Boys in the Band.
That's okay.
But we're going to be discussing The Boys in the Band. But The Boys in the Band is a little bit more positively associated in queer cinema history.
Yes.
Whereas the one we're talking about, yes, the 1980 movie by William Friedkin, Cruising, written by William Friedkin and based upon a novel by journalist Gerald Walker. Gerald Walker's novel about a serial killer targeting gay men in S&M clubs. Yep. But also Friedkin took some elements from an actual series of murders that happened during this time.
Yeah. I wondered how much it took from that, because I know there's always something happening somewhere, but I know there was like a big issue in gay clubs.
Now, as far as I know, William Friedkin, he's married like 4 times to 4 different women. As far as I know, he is He is a heterosexual man, as far as I know. But it seems that it's so strange how he made his mark onto queer cinema. This particular guy in two different movies that are both gay movies, but kind of seem very different. And this movie, Cruising, well, a lot of gay rights activists protested against this movie back in its time. And they were trying to interrupt shooting of it. They had to dub in a lot of stuff after the fact because
people yelling and
activists
stuff.
were yelling because they were worried about the stereotyping of it. It also features literally as extras a lot of the S&M leather daddy scene in New York at the time. Friedkin has always sternly stated that this isn't about homosexuality as a whole.
Lucas and Vincent were not in the mainstream of gay life. They were into heavy leather. S&M. It's a world unto itself. I don't know how much you know about that sort of thing.
No, it's definitely
it's about
not.
a particular subsect.
Yeah.
And based on some murders that actually happen.
That's what makes it so brilliant, is that it's not just about any gay person being targeted. This is a movie about men who are being murdered, and the issue wherein there have always been certain sections of our society that if something happens to them, it's not investigated properly, or it's swept under the rug, or you get that they were asking for it thing. And this goes anywhere from homosexuals to sex workers to POC, women, men, whoever. Regardless, though, again, they didn't just do this sort of broad strokes. It is so honed in on this one particular scene that it is fascinating. And you could tell that there were real people.
It was controversial in its day. I think as time moves forward, this movie is, you know, for good or bad, it's a part of queer cinema history.
Sure.
Regardless how you feel about it. It seems like modern takes seem a lot more objective onto the movie and analyzing it without as much charge or tension behind it. But reading the Wikipedia pre-production and reception, there are some points where I think there was a documentary called The Celluloid Closet that referenced this movie. And there was a reference to where a couple of people claimed that they were attacked or gay bashed by someone who had claimed that they did it because they saw Cruising. And I think it was one of those movies where a lot of people were reacting to it, even though most people did not go and see it. Now, I don't want to diminish any experience in which people are getting targeted for their sexuality. I'm not diminishing that at all. That absolutely happens, and it happened a lot back then. But how can you differentiate that something like this is the specific motivation of the type of people who would do this anyway?
Exactly. It gives them it gives them a touch point, but they would do it anyway. It's not the cause. The only thing I don't know, maybe could have done was maybe certain people didn't know that was a subsect of the gay community were these leather daddy bars. Maybe
this is a fairly enlightening movie.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there are folks who didn't realize that there are literally warehouses full of men sucking and fucking in front of each other in various levels of undress and jock straps. We did not actually see any D in this movie, but we saw so many booties.
Well, apparently 40 minutes of this movie was cut to avoid an X rating. And,
I'm sure.
According to Friedkin, that 40 minutes that got cut made the movie more ambiguous upon the release of the theater.
Interesting.
Apparently there are things more specific, but...
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, also one of the bars that are featured in the movie, a mass shooting occurred there. And the guy who was convicted was declared insane, like he went to an asylum or something.
There's always going to be someone who wants to shut something down that they don't think is right or don't believe in or think shouldn't be happening. But like you said, if someone's going to do that to that extreme, it doesn't matter if it was this movie or a parade or whatever, you know, something would probably happen. Like you said, I don't think it's the cause. It could be the catalyst in a moment.
Maybe,
but I don't think
these things are usually being built up.
Absolutely. And this was, you know, it's interesting you talk about looking back on it. People look back on it maybe not necessarily fondly, because it is a crazy dark story.
Yeah.
But with less criticism. Part of it, though, if you think about the time, this is 1980. This is before AIDS was
it was just starting
widely
to become
known a thing.
yeah.
Like a lot of these places, this was not the scene 6 years later. You know?
Yes.
This was not
a lot
the
of people
scene.
would be dead.
And a lot of people probably didn't realize it was happening. You didn't have social media, television, podcasts, people talking about shit. I've learned so much about S&M stuff just from listening to one podcast with a gay guy on it who just talks about everything. There's information to be found whether you want it or not nowadays, but you could go your whole life without ever knowing there was a club like that in 1980. I understand people being afraid of, one, we don't want people to know these kind of places exist because we don't want them to target, or this is an extreme, not extreme, but it is, a niche within, and you don't want your mom to assume that you're dressing up in leather and sucking a guy's dick down on a warehouse if you're not.
Yeah.
And I understand that like fear because people do stereotype and they put people in boxes, Yeah. There's definitely that real thing of that's what it looks like in the movie, so that must be what it is.
And there always is like aspects of stereotypes that are just kind of true in a way.
Absolutely.
That are based upon that reality.
People are a lot more open now to accepting people, and if they're not, that's fine.
And things can seem more intense especially when it's a culture that has been socially repressed.
Yes.
These things can just kind of boil up more in specific ways. I mean, heterosexual people, often when they're older, as I've learned, will also go into big warehouses and do freaky ass shit to each other.
Totally. Alone, as couples, in masks.
But the difference between a marginalized person representing their sexuality and someone who's more of the norm in society is that they, whether they want to or not, will have to bear the weight of an entire identity.
Yes.
Whereas the more normalized version just gets to be that, and anyone who disapproves of them will at the very least not have their whole gender or sexuality have to bear the weight of it.
Yeah. And obviously, with everything that we've said, there are terrible, awful things happening today right now to people because of who they are and who they love. And that is awful. But this was just a more closeted time where people had to be or felt they needed to be, or whatever, even more underground.
Let's lead into this, and we can kind of get into what I think maybe some of the protesters maybe had some points in.
Okay.
Though a lot of people were protesting a movie that hadn't actually been made yet. We've kind of seen that over and over again.
Yeah.
So there is a serial killer in the S&M leather clubs of gay New York, and this guy, you don't see him very vividly, but he has these aviator glasses. He's wearing like a leather jacket.
He wears a cop hat.
He looks like Lou Reed.
What are you doing?
Just looking for a pack of cigarettes. Why, are you afraid?
Should I be?
Yeah.
In the 70s and early 80s, he looks like Lou Reed. I in my mind, it's Lou Reed killing these men.
Without seeing his face, he's hot because men come up to him. He does not approach. He waits until someone approaches him, and that is who he takes away from the party.
And a fisherman sees body parts. The teacher from Columbia gets stabbed in the bed, gets hogtied.
Well, the teacher from Columbia happened weeks before, and we didn't see him because he actually got cut up into pieces.
We probably saw his arm or something.
We probably saw his arm. Well, and they were saying that they had body parts, and then there was this teacher from Columbia who had been murdered like a month before. And then the first murder we see is of an actor.
Yes, and he gets tied up and this man stabs him.
Yeah.
We see Paul Sorvino, who assigns his young officer, Steve Burns. Paul Sorvino plays Captain Edelson, the late Paul Sorvino, who passed away last year. Mira Sorvino's dad.
I know.
He assigns Officer Steve Burns. Steve Burns can skip the patrol bullshit and go straight to detective if he goes undercover in these gay S&M clubs to try to bait out and find the killer.
Because he's the right type.
So why me?
Well, frankly, all of the victims appear to be the same physical type, which is to say, they all look like you. Late 20s, 140, 150 pounds, dark hair, dark eyes.
I see.
I want to send you out there to see if you can attract this guy.
Usually this is something the police can move on, just claim it's something else or ignore it entirely. But this shit is making the papers.
Well, because there's a teacher and an actor. Before that, who knows who these other men were?
So
But they were talking about people been going missing for a while.
So Al Pacino, he tells his girlfriend, who's played by Karen Allen, that he's got to go and do this. And he's like, don't let me lose you, okay? Don't let me lose you. So he goes in. And what's interesting here is Pacino, I had read a little bit on this, had said that he didn't get a lot of direction from Friedkin of how he was supposed to handle especially certain plot turns. He goes into these clubs and he's seeing all these men doing a variety of things. A lot of time they're just kind of standing around. Or kissing, and men are come up and touching them. And I'm kind of imagining that Friedkin is just a casual, almost like a sociological observer into this scene through the eyes of the Steve Burns character. Like, it is just like a casual... Like, there's no judgment here, but almost like just a curiosity without being completely engaged in it.
The central character in this movie is, or at least does not believe at the beginning, that he is gay. We'll talk about what happens with him. I think he gets very confused in the process of doing this because he has to completely go into this world and be part of this world. I mean, there have been people who get hooked on drugs because they have to be undercover in a scene and they have to take a bump when the guy tells them to, you know, or they'll be caught. You know, you have to play the part.
Do you think he hooked up with anyone based on the scenes we got? Apparently, it's not as ambiguous in what was cut from it, but apparently United Artists lost any of the cut footage.
Lost it.
Yeah.
Someone took that shit home.
As far as we know, the cut footage is gone.
I think he might have. I think he might have tried to. He could have gotten scared. Maybe he did do. You know, there are certain people who will say, it doesn't matter if a guy or a girl sucks my dick's getting sucked. You know, and you can kind of let that go.
Sex work, it's for a lot of people, it's not that personable.
Absolutely. And if he's trying to get information, maybe he let something happen.
Well, I think he definitely did do something, and he would have had to for it to go where I think it went near the end of the movie. But, you know, last Wednesday we talked about The Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant. All-female cast. You could call it a feminist movie. But this movie, Cruising, let's hear it for the boys because
yes,
we're going to call it a meninist movie.
Let's hear it for the boy. Let's give the boy a hand. Yeah. Let's hear it for my baby.
That's right, all boys. It seemed like as he gets deeper and deeper into his undercover operation, it fractures his relationship with Karen Allen's character. And Karen Allen, and I think it's almost by design, feels completely out of place in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Almost like she's obstructing the whole point of the movie. And like she's getting in the way of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually kind of a clever bit of it.
I did like that because every time he goes to see her, he's deeper in. And he looks like he does not belong anymore in her apartment.
And they don't have a sexual relationship anymore. Like
yeah.
He tells the police about a kid named Skip Lee who was cited around someone who was murdered later in the movie. So that leads him to believe that he might have something to do with it.
And he's told, because he gets friendly with the bartenders and stuff, that guy gets in a lot of fights and is kind of rough.
So the police go to where Skip works at a restaurant. One is played by Ed O'Neill. They follow him and they take him in and they start beating the shit out of him. Like
this was
they
so
just
upsetting.
Fuck him up. Al Pacino's character is there too, also being interrogated.
He does get slapped once.
And then this guy comes in, a large black man in a jockstrap, who just comes up and punches the shit. out
Was
of
he
Pacino.
wearing a cowboy hat? He was wearing a hat.
Something like
Yeah.
that. He punches the shit out of Pacino to make it look good, like he's not
He's got
undercover.
a big handprint on his face and his lip is busted.
And they have this guy whip the shit out of the kid as well, and he gets real fucked up. But they have a fingerprint, a bloody fingerprint, and they didn't check this before
Until
they
after.
dragged the kid in.
This pissed me off so. This was so hard to watch. They made him pull his pants down and stand there half naked in front of like 4 men who were demeaning him. It was brutal.
Police don't come off well in this movie. At the start of this movie, they're making a couple of transgender sex workers have sex with them in a patrol car, and they try to report these guys. And Paul Sorvino is trying to do the best he can, but at the end of the day, he's going to side with his boys in these extreme situations.
Look, the guy was innocent. You worked him over like he shot the president or something. You destroyed that kid. You didn't even have a case against him.
You fingered him.
I fingered him, but I didn't think anybody was going to go that far with him.
Sometimes you only get that one chance.
He didn't have a knife.
So you got this poor kid who is essentially got beat up for being gay. They thought he was a killer, but if he's not the killer, then you just beat him up for being a queer kid in a queer place. Yeah. Steve is deeper and deeper, but the most normal person we probably get in this whole movie is Ted Bailey, the neighbor.
I'm Ted Bailey.
I'm John Forbes.
Hi.
Hi.
You doing a little house cleaning?
Oh, these, yeah. Somebody left them in my closet.
Yeah, that was Bobby. He had exotic tastes. Don't put him in the trash bin. Mrs. McGuire likes it if we stack our magazines. She sells them.
A lot more like an average gay man. He's got some knowledge of the world that he's in and around. He's not too far adjacent from it, but you could tell that his focuses are elsewhere.
Yeah.
And he has a boyfriend.
He's a writer.
Yeah. And he has a boyfriend and a roommate who's
a dancer, who's on tour,
who apparently is more trouble than he's worth. So I really like the Ted character, what little we get of him.
And he immediately takes Steve Burns. He shows up as soon as he moves in, welcomes him, invites him to coffee. They go and get to know each other. And it's really sweet. He's a good guy.
Stewart has some issues. Apparently, was supposed to have been displaying like a schizophrenia.
I got that because he speaks to his dead father.
Right.
His friend, who we figured out was the dad from some sitcom when we were kids. But
the Boy Meets World dad.
Oh, yeah, the Boy Meets World dad. He tells... Later, they interviewed that friend, and he says he always spoke of his dad like his dad was still alive, but his dad had been dead for like 10 years. Real quick, by the time we get to this point, we know he's the bad guy.
Allegedly. I'm not sure if the Stewart Richard character, maybe he killed someone. I don't think he's the guy we see at the very beginning.
I do.
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, it was very shadowy, but it seemed like
Because
his curls were tighter.
Song. He sings the song. He has a tell. The first bodies that are found are completely cut up. He's like, I'm killing them. I have to dispose, right? Dumping them in the water. Then he gets to the school teacher, cuts him up, but doesn't take his body parts anywhere. He just leaves it. Then he gets to the actor who he hogties and stabs, but again, leaves him there. He progresses to the point where then he kills someone in the park, just in the park. Then he kills someone in a sexy movie house.
We don't see it clearly that it's Stewart. We don't see it that clearly.
He says that line every time.
Well, so does our lead later in the movie here.
I know.
But he's not fed that information based on the scenes that we see.
No, I know, but still, people knew that he was saying that because people heard it be said. He could have heard it from literally anyone.
Yeah, we're all here, they're all here, you're all here, or something like that.
It's like, we're here, you're here, I'm here. Something like that.
So Stewart knows that he's being followed because Steve broke into his apartment and looked through all his unopened letters to his dad that he never sent.
Some kind of
and read them.
Creepy stuff,
and
too.
read them, and it was intense, like dark shit. So Steve, without talking to the captain, Paul Sorvino, baits this guy out into a park.
I think that's because he felt so bad about what happened to Skip Lee that he didn't want to do it until he was sure. Because he tried to quit after that. Remember, he went to Sorvino and he was like, I can't handle this.
But they go off to a place in the park because, like, it's going to be a pickup. But Steve pulls the knife first.
Oh, I thought it was the other way around.
And so Stewart's in the hospital or arrested or whatever.
He's in the hospital.
And it seems as though this case is resolved. Case closed. This guy is going to be charged for the murder.
He
of these
still
men.
says, I didn't kill anybody.
We see Steve go back to his girlfriend and be like, it's over. Everything's okay now.
Can I come back?
And she's like, yes, you can. And then we get Paul Sorvino. He's called to a murder. And it's the apartment where he assigned Steve Burns to live. Mm-hmm. And we see that the true hero of the movie, Ted Bailey, has been murdered. Yeah. Now, there's an implication here that maybe it was his roommate. Sorvino's character, he asks about who's living in the area.
Lives in that apartment down the hall.
Guy called Casey, but he's away for the summer. The one next door is registered in the name of John Forbes, and landlady thinks it's a phony because she ain't seen him in a couple of days.
What's that name?
John Forbes.
And he's told the alias that he gave to Steve Burns, and he realizes, oh, this is the place where we had set him up.
He looks very distraught. There's like 3 things happening in that moment. One, he realizes that the cop that's talking to him is the shit cop that the transgender sex worker told him about that forced himself on them in the car.
Right.
So he realizes that. He realizes that this is next door to where he put his cop guy. And then I think there's another thing. I don't know if he thought that he did it, but Steve did anything.
Jesus Christ.
Sir?
I do think it was the boyfriend roommate guy because
I think Steve did it.
Okay, why?
Because he needed to do that. He had feelings for Ted, and that's why he was so mad at the roommate. And he did
try to beat up the roommate, but the roommate pulled a knife on him.
And he's also dealing with his own latent homosexuality here.
Yes.
And I think that boiled up in this scenario to where the one who had the most positive and sincere feeling out of everyone that he was around, something about in him broke in the nature of, in his own shame, he had to kill Ted to almost be free of that feeling.
When did he do that?
When it was all said and done. It was like the last thing he did.
Like after he called his cop friends and they took Stewart in?
I mean, it's definitely off scene. I mean,
yeah,
you can... It's not that thin of a window here.
I guess I just assumed he never went back because then at that point he's with the cops and telling them what happened. I mean, and then it's the next day in the hospital and he's there.
It all feels very open-ended. I mean, there might be people that support either of our interpretations here.
For sure.
But it seems like Paul Sorvino, being so surprised at hearing the alias given to him and that giving him pause, seems to allude that he has a realization of maybe what happened. Yeah. But what's funny is that Paul, because he's a cop and now Steve is made detective, he will never tell anyone about it. Even if he does think or assume that Steve did that murder.
Yeah, I guess I just thought it was Gregory who's the roommate because he and Steve did get in that big fight, but Gregory is the one that pulled the knife, and he was yelling because he was assuming, and this is why I think Steve got mad. Gregory was assuming that they were fucking. He thought that he and Ted had a relationship when Gregory was off dancing, and Gregory was back now, and they got into a fight, and I think that Steve got so mad because he truly in that moment had those feelings for Ted. And when it was said out loud, it did make him crazy in that moment with Gregory. But because Gregory was so quick to pull a knife, I guess I just read it as Ted came home, Gregory confronted him and lost his shit. Mm. I don't know though. Maybe it was Steve, but to me, Steve was so in his head. And I ultimately think that he was a good guy. Because of being so upset about Skip, not wanting to continue after that, being, having this relationship with Ted. And I do think that he had feelings he couldn't explain. And there is that moment at the very end where he's shaving his face and he just looks at the camera. And I personally did not read malice in that. I read that he's like now broken and has decided he is going to now live a lie for the rest of his life.
The way Pacino plays this character, he plays him very dry.
Yeah.
Almost kind of blank in a lot of ways. It's hard to have an emotional read on the Steve Burns character.
I agree, except when he's distraught.
Yeah, when he's a little frustrated.
When he's in the stairwell with Sorvino talking about he doesn't know if he can do it anymore, like he seemed like a child.
But it seems like it's against this wall of feelings that is overcoming him. That's the part that breaks him. He'd rather not be feeling.
Exactly. So I get what you're saying too. He could have taken that out on Ted, but
who knows? What do y'all think? Have you seen Cruising? Anyway,
I love a movie that does this. I love when we don't agree because it's up for interpretation. Although I wish I could see those deleted scenes.
Right. Well, that's the movie Cruising, a very interesting movie.
Yeah.
A lot of the movie is just Al Pacino just watching men do all kinds of stuff to each other in a fetish club. Yeah. There's even like it's as close to being porn without it actually being pornographic. Yeah. I mean, it really rides the line. Like I said, they had to cut 40 minutes off this movie. But it's also just so interesting that Friedkin even made this movie.
No. Well, and it makes you wonder, obviously he read the book and was into it and was curious about the, real life things that were happening at the time and wanted to shine a light on that. Apparently, but you do wonder, like, what draws you to it. Was he also curious? Did he sort of use this did he use Al Pacino's character as a voyeur to also get into that world?
Yes, maybe. It does seem, I do feel the voyeurism from the director himself,
Yeah.
Like, we don't know how gay he was, if he was, or bi or whatever, but it does seem like we are looking at it through his eyes. This is more of a gay adjacent movie than it is necessarily one that is made by gay people.
Well, and you made a comment earlier, and I can't remember how you put it, but it really solidified the thought what I just said in my head, because you don't feel so much that it's being directed. You feel as though Pacino is being filmed. Mm-hmm. He's watching from a distance most of the time.
Yeah.
There is a much bigger difference. One thing I love that we didn't mention is they get into like the hanky code, and there's all these things that are you just don't know about unless you know.
Well, light blue hanky in your left back pocket means you want a blowjob. Right pocket means you give one. The green one left side says you're a hustler, right side you're a buyer. The yellow one left side means you give golden shower, right side you receive. The red one means...
Thank you.
See anything you want?
I'm gonna go home and think about it.
This movie offers a relief to a curiosity. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you have to be gay to be curious about something like this, to want to understand more. But some people might be more self-conscious about how they might be identified by proclaiming that they want to understand a little bit more about this very specific gay subculture. Yeah. But that's the movie Cruising from 1980 by William Friedkin. Interesting movie. Very interesting movie. We're going to give it 1 through 5 each. I'm going to go first.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty much a dead on 3.5, I think.
Okay. I'm going to give it a 4.
So there at a 7.5, just barely missing an A tier. A lot of people fall kind of mid on this movie. We're a little bit higher than normal. We kind of like these gritty 70s neo-noirs for sure. We like that kind of shit. This is 1980. This is like thief time.
Absolutely. And this does one of our favorite things, which is show a slice of life that we are unfamiliar with.
This sits between the movies Collateral by Michael Mann and Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut.
That seems very appropriate.
In the 7.5 area. Yes, thank you for listening to the show. We've got more gay-ass movies all month long. So check the show notes for links, other places to find us. like and subscribe. Leave comments. Let us know what you think about anything we're talking about. Is this movie more controversial for you? I do understand if people are maybe a little more critical of this movie. That's not beyond me. I totally understand. If you wanted to explain why or go into depth on that, I'd be happy to hear it. But in the meantime,
movies are gay, and so are you.
My baby, he don't talk sweet. He ain't got much to say. But he loves me. I know that he loves me anyway. And maybe he don't dress fine, but I don't really mind. 'Cause every time he pulls me near, I just wanna kiss. Let's hear it for the boy. Let's give the boy a hand. Yeah. Let's hear it for my baby. You know you gotta understand.